In this lesson, we're going to be looking at how you respond effectively to the imaginative writing tasks that appear in section B of paper 1 of the new Edexcel English Language exams. This lesson is going to look at how you manage your time, how you interpret the task, so ways of understanding exactly what they're asking you to do and what kinds of things they're looking for in the response that you give to those tasks. We're going to look at how you generate ideas, and in particular how you use the two images that are going to be provided for one of the questions to generate your ideas and do more than just write about what you can see in that image, because they're looking for something a bit more sophisticated. We'll also look at how you plan a response to the imaginative writing tasks, and how you plan a working plan, one that you're actually going to use, that's going to be useful to you as you go forward and write your response. So the objectives for this lesson are that by the end you'll know what you're being expected to do in response to the imaginative writing task in terms of the type of response they want, the sort of things they're going to be looking for when they come to mark that response. You'll understand how to generate ideas, in particular how to use the two prompt images to generate your ideas and go beyond just describing what's in the picture. And you'll also understand a variety of ways of planning your response, different ways that you can use to create a working plan. That will enable you to move forward as you work through the rest of the imaginative writing unit and thinking ahead to the final exams, to be able to generate ideas for whatever task is set and to create an effective working plan so that you can produce a piece of imaginative writing that gets you the maximum number of marks you can possibly achieve. Okay, we'll begin by thinking about how we manage your time. Now, you have in total 45 minutes for the writing task, just as you do on paper 2 for the transactional writing. And that 45 minutes includes planning time. It is absolutely vital that you plan your writing. You are being asked to produce an extended piece of creative writing. If you don't plan, you will end up producing something that someone from the exam board described as being rather like a runaway train. It's terribly exciting and full of potential at the beginning. It goes along very, very quickly for a while, but then begins to wobble, comes off the tracks, and at the end it crashes and burns and everybody's feeling a bit miserable. The old adage applies: if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. So do use the planning time before you actually start writing. It includes time for checking and correcting, because remember, you're being, as well as being marked on the content, you are also being marked on technical things like spelling, punctuation, grammar, and the quality and appropriateness of your vocabulary. So you do need to spend some time at the end just going back and checking and correcting anything. So if we look at how that breaks down, the first 10 minutes are planning. And in that time you need to read both tasks and very quickly choose the task you're going to do. Don't spend ages agonising. Go with your gut instinct. Do the one that appeals to you the most. Once you've chosen your task, you then need to identify the theme or the topic, the focus for that task, because it's no good producing a piece of creative writing on something different to the topic, the theme, the focus that they've set in the task. If you do that, you won't get very many marks, no matter how many imaginative writing techniques you put in there. So use your highlighters or underline or circle, but identify the theme within the question. You then need to try and picture the scene or the event or the character or whatever it is you're going to write about, however you're going to do it, whether you're going to do it as an extended piece of description or as a narrative or as a monologue. You need to be able to see that, because a big part of creative writing is painting pictures with words and allowing your readers to see the things that you're trying to describe. If you're using the prompt images, they can be used as a springboard, as a starting point, but you shouldn't just look at describing what's in those images. Having thought about what you're going to write, you then need to create some kind of structured plan, a working plan, which indicates the content and the structure of your piece, and also has some comments on there about the types of imaginative writing language techniques that you're intending to use. You then spend 30 minutes writing, and in those 30 minutes obviously you need to be using your plan, going backwards and forwards, making sure you're including all the things you intended to, but you need to be thinking about sort of practical things such as the paragraphing. You need to make sure you're organising your writing into paragraphs because you're expected to respond in continuous prose. You need to think about the quality of your expression. You should be using standard English primarily, so try to avoid cliches unless you're doing it deliberately, idioms. Don't include too much dialogue. If you're writing a story, keep that to a minimum, all right? Once you've crafted your piece of writing, you then need to spend 5 minutes checking. Check for spelling mistakes. If you spot any, cross them out and put a correction. If you just cross it out, but don't write a correction either above it or near it or with an asterisk going to somewhere else on the paper, they will mark that mistake as being an error, and obviously that's going to lose you marks. Also check for weak or inconsistent or inappropriate vocabulary. You need to show off your vocabulary skills in this writing task. So you need to make sure that the language that you're using is as powerful as possible and has the impact that you want it to have on your readers. Also check for inconsistencies, and this is where the checking the grammar comes in. So you need to make sure that you've got verb and subject agreement. So if you're talking about a plural subject, so plural noun, the verb ending needs to be plural as well. Check the tenses. Remember, you shouldn't be changing tenses within a single paragraph. You should be staying in the same tense and then changing tenses in the next paragraph if you want to change. So check your tenses, check your verb subject agreement, check your use of pronouns as well. All of those things that can make a piece of writing seem a little bit inconsistent. All right, so that's how you go about managing the 45 minutes that you have available for it. Let's go on now and look at what to expect from the imaginative writing task. There are some things that you already know. For example, there will always be a choice of 2 tasks. The themes of both of those tasks will be linked to the themes in the 19th century prose extract, and you'll see what I mean by that when we look at one of these these 2 tasks, because you'll see the way that it's linked to the extract that you've looked at previously from Little Women. One of the tasks will always have 2 images, and it looks from the sample papers that the exam board have produced so far that will always be task 6. Those 2 images will be themed. They will be themed to be in line with the theme of the task, obviously, because they're there to help you generate ideas. You're told that you may use them, so it's optional, and that they're writing prompts. They're not asking you to describe the picture. If they wanted you to do that, the task would say, write a response in which you describe what you can see in this picture. That's not what the task says, okay? They're there as inspiration. In terms of the 40 marks available for the imaginative writing, 24 of those marks are given for the content, so the idea that you hit upon and that you convey to your reader, the way that you convey that in terms of your communication, so your paragraphing, and also bigger things about structure such as your use of maybe a 5-part narrative structure, or your use of flashbacks or foreshadowing or whatever it might be. So that's where most of the marks come from. The remaining 16 marks are awarded for the quality of your spelling, your punctuation, your grammar and your vocabulary. And remember, you need to be using things like punctuation and grammatical devices for deliberate effect, just like you're making vocabulary choices to have a particular impact on your reader as you're going through your piece of writing. So that's what to expect. Let's have a look now at 2 tasks from an exam paper. Okay, so on your screen you can see the 2 imaginative writing tasks that come from the exam paper, the sample paper that has an extract from Little Women. The extract from Little Women saw one of the characters, Jo, trying to create quite a lavish meal for her family. So task 5 is asking you to write about a time when you or someone you know tried to learn something new. So that links in with the theme of the text, because Joe was trying to do something new, and actually that text in the reading section was exploring what was important, and what was important was actually the fact that she tried. She got it wrong, but she tried. They tell you your response could be real or imagined. So you can base it on things that have really happened, or an experience that you've really had. But do bear in mind you are supposed to be producing a piece of imaginative writing, so you will need to include lots of imaginative language techniques. We move on to question 6. The first thing question 6 tells you is to look at the images provided. So they're directing you to those two images, the two images associated with this question. And the theme or the focus for this question is an experience in which food played an important role. And the link there with the theme of the 19th century text is obvious. Jo was creating a meal for her family, and the new thing that she was trying to do was to learn to cook a formal dinner for people. Again, it tells you that your response can be real or it can be imagined, and that you may, so you don't have to, but you may wish to base your response on one of the images. And basing it on one of the images means using maybe a detail or an idea that the image suggests to you to get you into the piece of writing that you're going to do, rather than just describing what's in that image. Okay, so they're very typical tasks. You can see the link to the 19th century text. Let's go on now and identify the key words in these tasks. So the first thing to note is the comment in both tasks that tells you that your response could be real or imagined. That's telling you can make it up, you can be really imaginative with your response, or you can base it on something that's actually happened. And most of the tasks, when we look at the sample papers, are things that most people will have had experience of to some degree or another. Remember, however, that although you may be writing about something that's actually happened to you, you need to sort of fictionalize that. You need to convey that in a creative and imaginative way. So you're not being asked to write a standard piece of autobiography, you're being asked to write a piece of fiction. The other comment to notice is you may wish to base your response on one of the images. So that modal verb may is telling you that you can use the images or you can just ignore them. It's perfectly acceptable to provide a response to question 6 that doesn't have anything to do with the images. Okay, and in terms of basing your response, as I've said a couple of times before, it's not about describing the image, it's about taking the ideas or the suggestions from that image to create something new. Okay. And finally, this important thing at the end that they put in italics, that your response will be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation and grammar. So not only do you need to spell, punctuate correctly and use grammar correctly, but you also need to use it appropriately. And that's telling you that they're expecting you to understand how to use different punctuation marks to create different effects, how to construct different sentences, how to play around with the order of words within sentences to create different effects, and to make appropriate vocabulary choices for the task that you are doing. So pay attention to the technical side as well as the content and the creative side of the response that you're giving. Right, I'd like to focus now on question 6 and the way that we can use images as writing prompts. Obviously this is something that can be really useful if you can do it well. If you do it badly, you won't get very many marks. So it is important to understand what they mean by basing a response on an image rather than just sort of describing the image. So if we revisit question 6, and have a look at what question 6 is asking us to do. So it starts by asking us to look at the image, and then it gives us the theme. So as I said, you need to identify the theme or the topic or the focus of the particular task you've chosen to do, and here it's an experience in which food played an important role. That is what we must be writing about. Okay, we then get told that it can be based on something real, so it could be an actual event, but we do have to render it in an imaginative way. We have the option of using images, and we can base them on one of those images. So we can take the ideas from one of those images and use it to help us convey whatever event or setting it might be that we're going to use in response to this. Okay. So how do you use the images? Well, the first thing to say is look beyond the obvious. Okay, images are a little bit like text. It's about being visually literate as well as literate with words. So you'll have the surface level of the text, but you need to look at the smaller details. You need to think about what's outside of the image as well and what's being suggested by the image. You should not write a response that is directly about the content of the images. Okay, what you're being asked to do is think about the various details in the images that are provided, and think about different interesting ways that they're sparking ideas in you. Think about ways that you could convey particular things in sensory terms, because obviously imaginative writing relies quite heavily on the use of sensory language to bring the text alive for the reader. Think about what might be out of shot as well. Okay, so there might be things outside of that photograph that you think, oh, okay, well that's an image about this. But I wonder what was happening around that. And actually the things outside of the shot might give you just as many ideas for your own writing as the things that you can actually see in the picture. Think about what might have happened just before the image was taken, and actually that might be what you end up writing about. You might not write about the image itself, or you might have the image as the starting point for your story and then have a great big long flashback and write about all the things that led up to the image. Think about what might be happening just after the moment the picture is captured. Generally these pictures will be photographs, so after that photograph has been captured, what happened next? And that what happened next again is a rich source of material for creative writing. Consider any emotions or atmosphere that seem to be being conveyed in the images, because that might then give you some inspiration about something that's happened to you that where those emotions or that atmosphere was important, and you could write about that rather than trying to write about a picture. So focus on the bigger ideas in these images, the issues being suggested to you by the images rather than the literal image themselves. So for the task 6, which asks you to write about an experience where food played an important role, on the exam paper there were 2 pictures. One of them was a market, a fruit and veg market, and the other one was a little boy blowing out some birthday candles. Okay, these aren't the actual images from that sample paper. The images on that paper were black and white because it's a sample paper and because it had been photocopied, but in the real exam you will get colour images, and the colours can be really important. So I've found 2 images that are incredibly similar in terms of the subject matter and what they're suggesting for you to have a look at. Okay, so these are the images. So in terms of these, we wouldn't be writing a story about a little boy blowing out his candles on his birthday cake. That's too obvious, it's too boring. You need to think around that. What we'll do now is have a look at some interactive images, and on those interactive images I'll walk you around some of the ideas that are being suggested by that. Okay, so this is the first of our images. This is the little boy blowing out the candles on his cake. What I've done is to make this image interactive, and all the little tabs that you can see on there, all the little circles have information on there. Now there's information up here about using the 5 senses. So obviously when you access this image you can read those, and down at the bottom I've given some suggestions about things that you need to consider when you're planning and writing an imaginative response. So choice of point of view, the setting, the context, creating an atmosphere, thinking about the characters. Now, as I said earlier, you're not supposed to just write a story about a little boy blowing out his candles. You're supposed to look at this image and pick out ideas, suggestions, atmosphere that are being suggested by the details in this image. So for example, if we look here, when I looked at this, it looked to me like this image had been taken in the little boy's family kitchen, And to me, that was reminding me of the fact that food is an important part of family life. Family meals for many families are the only time, particularly if you've got teenagers, when you all come together and you all talk about your day, and it's a way of holding the family together. But also cooking can be a way of showing love for your family. You know, this cake that the little boy's blowing the candles out on looks like a cake that maybe his mum has made for him. Or his big sister's made for him. So it can be a way of showing affection. So the idea there that's being conveyed to me is the idea of food being an important part of family life. So that might be something I could develop in my imaginative writing response. Okay, now obviously the little boy is really important in this image, and to me that's reminding me that a lot of childhood memories tend to involve food. For example, going to the seaside with grandparents and eating fish and chips, or maybe having an ice cream and getting all covered in ice cream when we're very little. Equally, Christmas dinners with all the family, and that picks up on that idea I mentioned just a minute ago of food being an important part of family life. And of course, as in this image, food is important in birthdays, and birthday cakes can be important, and birthday teas can be important. So you could take the scenario and write about that, but not write about this specific scenario, not write about this particular image. Okay, now when I looked at this, again picking up on this idea of cakes being important, cakes are important in a lot of celebrations that we have in our life, major kind of life events. For example, christenings, weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, bar mitzvahs, all sorts of momentous occasions in people's lives. We have big celebration cakes. So one way to respond to this might be to write about a really important celebration cake, and maybe do a detailed piece of close description of that cake, which could work really well if you did a sort of traditional three-tiered wedding cake. You could structure your description around each tier of the wedding cake and do something like that. So that might be quite an interesting way to go with that. Now, I mentioned the importance of memories being linked to food, and our sense of taste is really closely bound up with our sense of smell. And looking at these candles, I started to think about maybe doing a response with someone who had reached their 100th birthday. They were blowing out the candle on their 100th birthday, and that then catapulted them back in their minds to when they were little, and then they could talk about the importance of food through the years. Or maybe it would be the importance of food during rationing in the war, when their children were young and they were trying to do birthdays for their children, and they had to save up all their ration cards and that sort of thing. So just playing around with the ideas. So I also looked at this and I thought, well, this is great. This is a little boy blowing out his candles, but he's not there on his own, is he? If that's his birthday, there are going to be other people in there. So it's always worth considering what is out of shot. So again, it's that kind of contextualizing of your story and using these images to spark ideas, but not necessarily write about the literal details that are in that image. So that's image 1. Let's look now at image 2, the marketplace. Okay, so here we have our second image, and again, when you go to look at this image, you can click on these and you can bring up some of these bigger ideas, but I'm just going to take you through some of the tabs that I've put on the main image because I thought this was quite an interesting one. The first thing that's quite interesting is the fact that there is nobody there. Okay, so what's going on out of sight? It looks like we're at this market with all this food and there's no one there. That to me makes me think, well, what time of day is this? This could be really early in the morning because it looks like none of this stuff has been touched. So in terms of a setting, really early dawn in a market might be quite interesting, or it might be the importance of food to market traders because that's their livelihood. I also started to think about, well, why today, when we have supermarkets and we have online grocery shops, why would you actually bother to go to visit a market like this to buy food? And that sort of got me thinking, well, actually, if you're doing a really special meal or you're doing a meal with unusual ingredients, you might want to go and to a specialist market, and again that might be tied in with the idea of food as a part of a celebration or part of a cultural event. So going to a market might be the event in itself, and going to buy food there becomes something important, suggests the importance of the food there. I was also struck by the range of colours, and this then set me thinking about the film version of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory that stars Gene Wilder, when he opens the doors to his factory and the children see their first glimpse of the inside of the factory has sort of all these lollipops and rainbow colours and a chocolate waterfall in there. And I thought, well, actually, you know, food and the colour of food is quite important. If I was going to be really imaginative, maybe I'd pick up that idea of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and maybe develop that a little bit more. Perhaps I could be Charlie Bucket after I own the Chocolate Factory and I'm a grown-up and I'm, you know, writing the sequel to the Great Glass Elevator and what happens there. So you think outside of the box. You can be as imaginative and creative as you like. Now, obviously, there are lots of different fruit and veg here, and that's going to generate lots of different scents, lots of different smells, and the market itself is going to be full of smells. Most markets have stalls where they're cooking food as well, and it becomes a really sensory experience. So I was sort of wondering about that, and I was also thinking, well, actually, this doesn't look like a UK market. This looks like somewhere abroad. I'm not quite sure where, but it looks quite exotic in the way that it's laid out, and we've got obviously this basket hanging from the ceiling there. And then I started to think, well, actually, when we go abroad, we eat different foods, and food becomes an important part of experiencing that culture and that different country. So maybe the smells, the colours, the whole experience of having different food could be a way of writing about an experience of going abroad for the first time, or going somewhere really exotic, and food being a key part of that experience. The other thing that struck me was the sounds that you usually hear in a market, and again, picking up that idea of food being a cultural thing. If you're abroad and you're in a market, every market is a cacophony of sound. You have loads of noise, you have the market sellers calling out their wares, you have people having conversations that you kind of overhear and half hear. If that's in a language you don't understand, that can be real sort of sensory overload. And when you add that into the food and the colours, that becomes a really rich experience. So for me, if I was going to use this image, I would probably write about visiting a different country and deciding whilst I'm there that I'm going to try and cook one of the local dishes. So I go to a local market and I'm kind of overwhelmed. I don't know what some of the fruit and the vegetables are, and the noise and all the smell. So there are ways of using these images. I'm not writing about this particular market, and I'm not just describing the pineapples and the leeks and the aubergines that I can see in there. I'm thinking around it. I'm thinking about settings, ideas, themes and events, those big things that we deal with when we're constructing a piece of creative, imaginative, fictional writing. This image and the other image with the little boy blowing out his candles are available. You can see on your screen now the two links to those. If you type those in, they will take you directly to the images. Once you're there, all you need to do is hover over each of the round icons, and that will bring up the notes that I've put on there. Okay, they're suggestions, they're questions to get you thinking about how you could use these images effectively.